Welcome to Health System CI's interview with James Case, VP and CISO with Baptist Health. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. James, thanks for joining me.
Howdy, and glad to be here.
All right, very good. So you are going to speak at the Chime Full Forum, which is pretty cool, um, down in San Antonio or over in San Antonio, depending on where you are. So your
Yep.
session's entitled "Identity Crisis: The New Frontier of Digital." Great topic. I'd like to give people, sort of people who are going to be at the conference, an idea of what you're going to speak about, and for the many people who won't be there, a little exploration of your thoughts on the topic. So, if you want to start out by giving me an overview of your organization and your role, and then we'll sort of get into the subject.
Oh, sure. Well, Baptist Health. Well, we're based in Jacksonville, Florida. We have 6 hospitals down here in Northeast Florida, and I've been the CISO here for about 4 years.
All right, very good. Identity, huge issue. Seems to be one of the pillars of security, how people are getting their arms around that whole shift to, however many years ago, from sort of a perimeter mindset to there's no such thing as a perimeter anymore, and this adjustment to
Yep.
identity. If you want to, at a high level, take me through that evolution briefly, your thoughts on that general evolution, and are we in an identity first security environment, or are there other, is it one of a few pillars? Where does identity fit in with where security stands today?
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, yeah. So the shift, obviously, which everyone knows, is shifted from the traditional, everything's on the inside, and you have to, kind of be on the network to access things, to now everything's spread around to different SaaS or cloud services. And so, with that example of a shift, makes it difficult to protect and makes identity then kind of that front door to everything, right? And then there's that phrase I'm sure you've heard 100 times that the bad guys are not really breaking in as much as they're just logging in, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, those are kind of shiny examples of how identity really is that front door, that front edge, and what we need to focus on and really protect.
Right. So identity is everything. The credentials are the keys to the castle. Much easier, I guess, to trick someone using social engineering out of their credentials than to do some sort of really technical attack, right? I mean, those are higher level skills.
Absolutely.
Everybody in the world can use ChatGPT or any other uh,
Yeah.
LLM to help them craft a phishing email. So it's a much lower barrier to entry. There's so much information people have out in their social media. I think one almost got me the other day. I forget what it was. It really did, where I just caught myself. So they can get you. But that's the idea, right? And
Yeah.
you have
It's
tens
very
of
convincing.
thousands of people with credentials in your organization, some not even many not even employees among the physician community. So it's the general idea we get. It's the devil's in the details in the execution, right? Because of the complexity of healthcare.
Right.
Your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, right on, right? With 15, 20,000 identities, it's hard to track what everyone's doing with every one of them, right? So it takes automation, it takes services, it takes tight processes really to monitor in a consistent manner. And then all we can do is look for anomalies, look for outliers, and then jump on those and investigate and make sure that nothing nefarious is going on.
So this automation and looking for anomalies, are we talking a lot of AI here, or is when we say
Of course, you
automation?
had to go there.
Go
Come
ahead.
on.
Well, I mean, automation
Uh,
is old school
yeah.
AI, right? And now we think of new school AI. Is new school AI in cybersecurity, or is it more the basic traditional AI?
I mean, certainly all the above is the answer, right? I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I joke about that, of course you went there because, obviously no technology or security conversation would be complete without bringing up or talking about AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
I even joked at a conference a week or two ago that every time you hear AI, take a drink or like take a sip, right? So
Yeah.
It's everywhere. So yeah, I think the answer is yeah. I think it's all the above. That it's old school AI, large language, or I mean not large language models. Kind of machine learning, right? Kind of the older school AI. Definitely is in use as part of our automation. As far as the new large language models, we're certainly using it. Not as much in security yet. We're looking at some functionality and features, to add that, but currently haven't implemented too much of the newer AI, if you will.
Do you see that happening? Is it just taking time for that to permeate, but it's
Yeah,
going to get there?
taking time and making sure that we can prove value, right? We have very limited budgets, and so we're at the point when we add something, we have to take something away. So we can't just keep adding. And so as we try to add layers, a lot of our struggle is to consolidate tools and kind of rationalize what we have so we can, save money or at least stay flat is really the goal.
Yeah, and I think that's a great topic to discuss a little bit. And I've heard about that before on the security side. We obviously it's a huge dynamic on the clinical side with the EHR space, right? Everyone wants to, a lot of people want to go with the enterprise EHR products before they look outside of that suite. And there's a whole process of deciding, is what my EHR is what they're offering in this space good enough? Or do I need to
Right,
go outside? Because I don't want to go outside because there's a lot of benefits of
right,
staying inside. And I've heard this idea on the security side as well, not as much, but there seems to be an underlying frustration with the fragmentation in the security space and the fact that in order to get a full suite, you have to go to so many vendors and I guess deal with integration on the back end or suffer from not having it. Do you see similar dynamics? But I guess it's just the vendor landscape is quite different.
yeah. I mean, from the EHR perspective, definitely right. But in the cyber world, yeah, I see cyber vendors adding new technology, right? Like abnormal adding functionality, like abnormal security adding functionality that goes into other, vendor spaces, right? And then other vendors adding features that abnormal has. And so that's an example where I've seen in the past 2 weeks, I mean, kind of thinking about, wow, those guys are kind of overlapping now, right?
Yeah,
Who's going to win, or are they going
right.
to, is one going to buy the other? I mean, those sort of things.
Yeah, so you're looking at that because you're looking at your suite of products and you're trying to manage this in a financially responsible way. You
Right,
want to do some application decommissioning, right? Because that's a huge issue overall in health systems with hundreds and hundreds, lots of overlap. We want to reduce that number.
right.
So you're looking at that on the security side.
Absolutely. Well, and we have to reduce that number, right? I have to stick to a budget. I don't have a choice. If I want to keep my cyber program afloat, I need to make sure that we're staying in budget and doing what the health system needs, right? Because we don't have unlimited funds, we have very limited funds, and so we need to stick within that and be a good team player for the health system.
And that's a very interesting topic there. I don't know if it's just me, but there could be, it's silly. There is a perception sometimes that organizations will spend whatever is necessary on security. So if the CISO, they're good, they can go make the pitch, they'll scare the hell out of the board. They'll cite some examples of breaches around and they'll get their money. But it's not the case from what you're saying. It is you have a finite amount of money to work with. Do the best you can.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, every word you said, I agree with that we normally get the funds that we request and because we build the case and we explain it in risk terms and business terms, I mean kind of the impact to the health system, but yeah, I mean, so that takes our leadership then going and taking the money from somewhere else, because it's not like there's this pot of money sitting on the side and they just keep giving us more. They have to go take it from other things, and so that's a difficult situation that we've been dealing with, and that reality is not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, that's it. And Dr. Zafar Chowdhury, who's the chief digital information and AI, he's got a whole bunch of titles, wonderful guy over at Seattle Children's. He's always very sensitive to that concept of yeah, maybe I could get more money, but it's coming from patient care or it's coming from somewhere.
Right.
So that's a
Mm.
deeper level of leadership and a deeper level of embracing the mission. That's I could maybe get do this, but is it the right thing to do? So your head's in a different place, a good place. and I guess
Right.
you would say that that's where your head should be as a C-suite leader.
Absolutely. I mean, great point. I think that that's my job, right? To work with my team and other teams and across the health system and leadership about, helping to find that priorities and put things in business terms, right? And I think kind of my mission statement that I wrote 4 years ago is, I mean, for the whole department is really helping the organization, helping the health system make informed, risk-based decisions and making sure that the right business leaders are involved in those decisions, right? So all I can do is make the case and explain the risk and, what could go wrong if we don't do it, but we can't solve every risk, right? So there's that flip side where we can't boil the ocean, can't solve everything. All we can do is prioritize. And that's really my mission, to focus on those priorities and help be the subject matter expert on those priorities and let the business and other leaders make those, kind of tough decisions.
Right, right. And when you have that mindset that we discussed, that sort of really deep fiduciary mindset, really thinking about the patients in the bed and the money you're spending, and whether or not they could hire another nurse if you didn't get a particular
Right.
product. That, and I've heard this before, that bleeds into your expectations of your vendors, right? Because when you are deeply connected to the mission and you're watching your dollars, you expect your vendors to act that way as well. And I
Right.
guess if you
Yep.
see them not acting that way, that's very disturbing and very off-putting, right? I'm
Yeah.
watching every dollar, and if I think you're trying to get every dollar you can out of me, then I'm not sure we want to work together. Is that sort of?
Right. 100%. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, again, every project we do in cybersecurity and really IT in general has the patient in mind, has the caregiver in mind, has our like doctors in mind. And so everything we do, like that's our North Star, right? And as we're working with vendors and partners, whether it be existing or new, absolutely right. Every word you just said is spot on. That we make sure that we kind of sniff that out and push them to, to get the best pricing. So it's not win-win. Maybe that's a dumb way to put it, but it's balanced, right? So we want to make sure that we're getting a fair price to get the best value, so we can spend our dollars wisely and get the most value for the health system. And to
Yeah,
your point, ultimately, the patient.
right, right. All right, let's go back to identity and talk a little bit more about identity. Again, the
Mhm.
devil's in the details on identity. Um, I'm curious about the relationship. It seems to me, as I think through identity and I think through the challenges that come with managing it, it's this huge number of users. It's the shifting of roles constantly. It's so non-static. And I would think there would be a tremendous, uh, you would need a really strong relationship with HR, because I would think a lot of these changes in status would be triggered, your knowledge of them would be triggered by HR. So you would need some really
Well,
tight integration there so you understood, oh, so and so is over here or over there or no longer with the company or this or that. And then you make the adjustments on the technology side. Is that accurate?
yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, but I mean, again, I think going back to your earlier comment about automation, the only way to do that is with automation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's most of us are at a point now where that's not really feasible to be done manually. And so we've had, from a termination perspective, and automated, kind of access removals, we've had that in place for 9 years now, where when a person is terminated in our HR system, that automatic that flows to our security access system and automatically terminates all the access. So that's been in place for many years. Only recently, in the past couple of years, have we automated kind of the other side of that, and that is the like department changes. And finally, we have that automated as well, where when somebody kind of moves departments or changes, then certain access is added and then removed.
Yeah. Added and removed, um, was
Based on their
removed.
department, right?
What's
If
that?
they change departments or
Yeah.
change job codes, those sort of things trigger access being added, based on role-based access.
Was the challenge the removal part? Because I'd heard that one of the issues was the constant stacking on of permissions, but never things never being removed. That was sort of
Right.
forgotten. And
Yeah.
was that
Access bloat maybe is a term I've heard,
access
right?
bloat?
Or yeah,
So
access
that was
bloat is a
more
term I've heard.
challenging than getting them added, was getting the old ones revoked. That had to be done.
Yeah, great. Yeah, good question. Right. I mean, so back to the devil's in the details. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely challenging, right? We want to make sure that we're, also balancing customer service, right? We want to make sure that we're responsive and trying to turn everything around as we can in 24 hours, right? Kind of same day service as much as we can. To our caregivers, right? They're out there trying to care for patients, right? And so we want to make sure that we get them the access they need to really do that, but in a secure and kind of consistent manner. But yeah, I mean, I would say the access removal was probably the harder part, right? And
Where,
making sure we do it in a timely manner and
yeah,
not too soon, right?
not too soon. Right, right, right. So again the devil in the details, the nuance here, the gray areas
Yeah,
is is overdoing the controls and overdoing the lockdown to where it gets in the way of user satisfaction, people being able to do what they need
right.
to do. Can you give me some examples of how um, CISOs or cyber can overdo their interest in getting this lockdown and controlled and run into problems with user satisfaction? Where can you go over the line there?
Well, I think a great example would be, I think an old example would be multi-factor authentication and conditional access, kind of tightening that too far.
Mm-hmm.
Those are examples where I've heard, kind of caregivers struggle with access, kind of adding too many layers, or maybe even making, certainly talk to my CMIO frequently about, finding that balance, making sure that our doctors don't need to log in too frequently or re-authenticate over and over and over, right? So that's an example of where, if we're not careful, if we just look at security and really ignore the patient care aspect and what they're trying to do, then we may, well, let's make them log in every hour, right? Have it time out. Well, no, that's not acceptable, right? How can somebody really care for a patient, right? Or in the ORs, right? Years ago, making sure that we have the proper timeout settings, right? We have to have a different timeout setting in the operating rooms because our standard, 10-minute, if the screen locks after 10 minutes, but yet the physician's trying to operate on a patient, that may cause a problem, right?
Yeah, so that's fascinating. You mentioned the discussion with the CMIO, and it makes me think of how, as a CISO and a cybersecurity team, you have to have a deep understanding. This is common sense, right? But you have to have a deep understanding of operations. Um, and again, it's not. When you get into the more granular levels, it gets more interesting. Some things are, oh yeah, of course. But
Yeah.
then there's some granular things where there are deep levels of operations where you need to
Right.
have those conversations. Oh, I didn't know that. I
Well,
didn't know it worked like that on the floor. So yeah, I understand we need to pull back on the controls I just put in, or I was gonna put in.
right. And I think it's understanding to your point, but I think it's also the relationships, right? I mean, I think that's everything we do goes back to relationships. And so it's that relationship with our CMIO and our other, senior, caregiver leaders, right? It's that understanding and conversation and partnership, helping to strike that balance because we can't go too far. But we also want to make sure that we're appropriately secure and always looking at that and balancing that and prioritizing that.
Yeah, and you want those conversations to happen before a control is put in place, I assume, rather than to get the angry
Totally.
phone
Right.
call after and to go, "Oh yeah, that's a great point. We'll undo that." Right? You want to
Yep.
so how much of these conversations are formal and committees and how much is just giving a phone
Mm.
call and saying, "Hey, we're thinking of this." Is it a mix?
Yeah, totally mixed, right? I don't know a percent. If I had to give it a percent, maybe 75-25, and 75 is we try to be formal about it, document it, so we can kind of have that trail of how we arrived at a decision. But it's definitely a mix, absolutely. But again, it's those informal conversations that really leverage those relationships, and and that way, when we get into the formal setting, we've already kind of talked it through and have the ideas, and we just kind of gel it and formal it and really just document at that point.
So you have 4 years in. You've obviously built those relationships. What would be your advice to a CISO at starting at a new place, CISO for the first time? How do you go about, first of all, who do you need to build them with if certain roles come to mind? And then what's your best advice on
Hmm.
establishing those relationships?
I think certainly, beyond your team, right, and the fellow IT peers and leaders, certainly from there it goes to your obviously the privacy audit, legal compliance. Those are really your peers across the organization, and then from there, CMIO, chief medical officer, chief nursing officer, right, building those relationships to understand kind of what they do, what are their priorities, and how can you help enable them and partner with them and support
Right.
them so they can do what they need to do, but in a secure way. Um, so I think it's kind of that evolution of those relationships, and that's the order that really comes to mind for me. But again, it takes probably a year, I would think, to really get to that level of having spoken to those team members and peers and others enough, and listened to them and had conversations and been enough meetings with them to understand their priorities. I don't think it's something that one conversation, right, can really get to. Is my point.
Right. So you need to identify the key people, build those relationships, and you use the term enable them. So it's a different mindset
Sure.
of going into the discussion and saying, hey, here's what I need from cybersecurity point of view. Here's what I need you to do. It's a
Right.
different way of approaching it. It's how do I
And not just
enable,
get out of the way, but how do we work together, right? So yeah.
how do we work together? Um, and as far as the why, making them understand the why, right? Because the why, we've had a lot of incidents, a lot of cybersecurity incidents. So, you know, nobody wants to, I think people know that they don't want to practice medicine without the tools, the applications they use, right? I think that's pretty scary to everyone who practices medicine. So I don't know how often you need to sort of tie that together and say, by the way, I know this stuff can be a little annoying, but the reason is so we don't have a breach and so you don't have
Right.
tools for a day, a week, 2 weeks, 2 months. Do you
Yeah,
need to
I would
tie
say
that in sometimes?
sometimes, but no,
Yeah.
normally the news does that for us at night
Right.
every night, right? But it's sometimes a conversation, and we have to again partner together. But again, if I'm not careful, then we go too far. So it takes that balance and those that feedback loop really to make sure that we're doing it at the right pace and not moving too quickly.
Right. The credentials, the social media, the core of our conversation today about identity is about getting credentials. Um, is that
Mm.
as active as ever? The attempts to do social engineering to get credentials from individuals, is that as active as it's ever been?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes, on a regular basis across the whole country, or really more than that. Yes.
And that's the number one problem. And so
I wouldn't say
what?
social engineering is the number one, but I would say identity and phishing is still the number one, right? As
Uh-huh.
far as a key way to, use social engineering. But other forms of social engineering are also a huge issue, across the whole, sector.
And around education, I'm sure you have a huge program of education to educate your users. You're probably working with marketing and maybe HR to get people not to click on certain things and not engage. Any thoughts
Yep.
around what your latest approach or latest thinking on that?
That's a balance as well. Maybe that's getting like, stop me if you're tired of hearing me say that, but it's
No,
true, right? It goes to the core of my role and what I do and every conversation I have. It's about finding that balance. But yeah, it's a balance there, and partnering with HR, we're actually embarking on really moving part of our organization to internal only mailboxes. So in
oh,
order to lower the risk of email phishing, we're actually going to be moving part of our, some of our team members to where they won't be able to interact externally. That way they can't get that phishing email. So that's a really a key way to reduce that phishing risk.
that's really, really interesting. I haven't heard of that before. So a certain portion of individuals in the health system, their work email would not allow them to communicate externally.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, similar to the financial industry, right? Companies like Citibank and Bank of America did that years ago, and so I've had that idea in the back of my mind for many years, and we're embarking on that journey right now as we speak.
I'm sure you've thought through all the challenges there, but I mean, what comes into my mind is,
Right, that's a whole separate meeting, right? That's a whole separate
yeah,
conversation.
well, I mean, do you want to save that for another time?
Probably with only a couple minutes left, but it came to mind because your question was around current items partnering with HR, right?
Yeah.
And that's absolutely a current item that we are partnering together, trying to strike that balance and find the right job codes that would move over to that. So yeah.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Are you see it almost like a pilot at this point, meaning you're gonna try it out with some users and see how it goes, or is this pretty
No,
much it's happening, it's on?
no, it's happening. It's
Yeah,
just now to your comment earlier, or the words about the devil's in the details. Now the devil's in the details on which job code. So we're working and kind of trying to draw that line now to figure out, well, these hundreds of job codes, yes, and these hundreds of job codes, no, right, is our starting point.
right, right. And I guess you could learn as you go and say, all right, this for this people they do need external access
Right.
and all that
Yep.
kind of thing. So you will see where that goes. Um, yeah, just before I let you go, just as you said, the job, the discussion today, everything is about balance. It comes up over and over because it's important. I mean, you're trying to find an acceptable risk point for large things and small things. Everything is about
Yep.
finding the right risk level, and you don't decide, operators decide, right? Other people are going to decide. You're going to
Correct.
present the
Correct.
case and you're going to, in some way, communicate the level of risk of a certain situation or certain control, whatever the case may
Exactly.
be. Here's where we are. Here's what it's going to, you don't like this number. Here's what's going to take to lower this risk number. It's either going to take money or more people or more controls. I can get you a lower number, but
Yep.
here's the cost. And by the way, some of the users I'm speaking to, they don't want to go there. What do you guys want to do, right? I
Right.
mean, where,
Well, and so it takes that top-down support, right? I'm
yeah,
not here to dictate. I'm here to guide and be the partner, right?
right.
And kind of guide and be the subject matter expert on the topic and advise. But ultimately, senior, business leadership needs to make those decisions because they're tough decisions. And then what's great about Baptist Health is then we have top-down support to really implement those.
Right. And you're always providing a recommendation, I assume, not just a set of options. It's a set of options
Correct.
with a
Oh, sorry.
recommendation,
Yes.
right? Meaning
And the why. Yeah.
if we're again, I'm coming up with pretend scenarios here, but let's say there is a risk number associated with anything you're discussing, you would be saying, here's my recommendation for an acceptable level of risk.
Exactly.
I could take you higher or lower. Here's what it takes to go higher. Here's what it takes to go lower. What do you guys want to
Exactly.
do? Yeah.
Yep. And Anthony, one thing I remember, and years of my first conversation when I first met you, if you remember this conversation 3.5 years ago, I think at this point, over 3.5 years ago, um, the word risk, right? I talked about the word risk a lot, and I think I really ended our conversation with it's all about the risk, right? But it's true, right? You've said the word, 10, 20 times. I've said the word 10, 20 times. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, everything we do is about the risk and measuring the risk and assessing the risk and prioritizing the risk and making tough decisions
Yeah.
about risk, as you just said. So, but that's what it is.
It makes me think of parenting. That's what I tell my wife. We can keep the kids locked up and have zero risk, but they're not going to be very well-adjusted children, right? So all
Exactly.
about the
Yep.
risk in many areas of life, right? All right,
Yep.
James,
Exactly.
this was awesome. I want to thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you down at the Fall Forum.
Awesome. Thank you. And
Uh,
nice to see you again. Have a good day.
have a great day.